Welcome to Press Review for the 12th of December. Foreclosures at London Heathrow and lessons to be learned. Snow at refugee camps in Lebanon and lessons to be learned too, as a photo of a child sleeping on the snow stirs online reaction. Let's start as usual with papers here in the UK. The Independent leads its front-page reporting on a study from King's College in London which has found that genetic differences account for 58% of the differences between pupils' GCSE exam scores compared to home or school environments, which accounts for only 29%. The paper also features a picture of the London city skyline captioned "Clouds over the financial sector on a terrible day for British banks." Both Lloyds and Royal Bank of Scotland are hit with spectacular fines. The Guardian leads its front-page reporting on concerns over standards at GP surgeries, with findings from Care Quality Commission revealing that 1 in 3 practices visited by inspectors failed to meet basic standards. It also reports on ministers considering to give up on banning new psychoactive drugs known as legal highs and instead regulate the booming trade in the substances, and also picture a female gay activist in India as the Supreme Court bans sexual relations between gay people. The Times leads its front-page reporting on G8 leaders promising to end tragedy of dementia as they pledge to fast-track global action to find a cure by 2025. It also reports on new prisons being built with in-cell telephones and terminal to help inmates order meals and choose activities, and pictures Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, wearing 3D glasses as she attended the screen of David Attenborough's Natural History Museum Alive film. The Telegraph leads its front-page reporting on dangerous GP surgeries being named and shamed as it highlights some of the worst, including one where inspectors found maggots in treatment areas. The paper also continues coverage on Mandela's memorial, but this time focusing on the interpreter who signed along the speeches for world leaders, with the paper quoting deaf groups saying he simply made childish hand gestures. And finally, pictures the Duchess of Cambridge, who attended David Attenborough's Natural History Museum Alive 3D with Prince William last night. And now let's take a look at top stories in the Middle East. As the Committee to Protect Journalists calls for investigations into killing of journalists, we take a look at the present and future of Egypt. Shadi Rahimi writes an article featured in Al Monitor and headlined "Journalist Killing in Egypt Remain Unresolved." Here Rahimi looks at the impact of the death of Egyptian reporter Al-Husseini Abu Daif as deposed President Mohamed Morsi faces trial for the 2012 killing of protesters. Rahimi recalls Morsi's supporters attacking a peaceful demonstration at the palace protesting his rule early December 2012, which sparked a bloody and polarizing battle that left Daif dead. Rahimi points out that Egypt has been ranked second on the Committee to Protect Journalists list of deadliest countries for journalists in 2013, with Syria ranked first. The committee recently made public a letter it sent to Egypt's Attorney General Hisham Barakat, urging investigations into the killings of journalists in Egypt. Rahimi states that Daif had filmed a video that day showing Morsi supporters assaulting protesters. He had written an article about Morsi's mass presidential pardon of 572 people, including Morsi's brother-in-law. Soon after it was published, Daif said he had received threats from Brotherhood supporters, according to the committee's interviews. Rahimi sees that at the time, the executive board of the journalist syndicate in Egypt blamed the leadership of the Brotherhood for Daif's killing and also held Morsi responsible for his failure to ensure public security. Rahimi indicates that much as in December 2012, Egypt is again awaiting another nationwide referendum on a new draft of its constitution in January, along with parliamentary and presidential elections, which are expected to follow. And to conclude, Rahimi says Daif's case has yet to be solved, but after Morsi's ouster, the Prosecutor General's office asked a Cairo judge to examine his case independently, a step that has encouraged his family and lawyers, according to the committee. The outcome of the investigation has yet to be announced. Daily News Egypt features an article by Farid Zahran headlined "Will the Muslim Brotherhood return to the political scene?" Here Zahran claims that there is possibility that the Brotherhood will return to the forefront of the political scene. Zahran believes that the main reason for the resurgence of the Brotherhood is the aggressive methods employed by supporters of the police state, specifically those supporting former Minister of Interior Habib al-Adli. As a result of these brutal tactics, the Brotherhood is gaining momentum every day. Zahran states al-Adli supporters are well aware of people's animosity towards them. They were conversely aware of the prestige of democratic entities and personalities. Moreover, supporters of the police state were unfamiliar with the methods of free political dialogue, which was a necessary asset in the battle against the Brotherhood. Zahran adds, some analysts further point out that they believe that some parties hid behind democratic institutions as they fear the return of the Brotherhood and the resulting backlash should they succeed at gaining power. Zahran points out that after June 30, al-Adli supporters believed that the fight against the Brotherhood was over. However, they continued to manipulate the threat in order to exercise influence over the population. Zahran goes on to say that al-Adli supporters were joined by those who wanted a new dictator and supporters of the administrative reform project. As a result, they have assumed a role at the forefront of the political scene, becoming more influential every day. Their influence has reached beyond the media and has been successful in implementing oppressive legislation such as ratification of the controversial protest law. Zahran highlights the importance of the timing of the law, which has sent a message to the democratic entities indicating the end of the alliance of June 30. Moreover, the writer says these parties have exerted considerable effort to encourage Democrats to vote against the newly drafted constitution. Should the Democrats concede they in effect will have excluded themselves from the democratic process and the political life of the country. Zahran sees that passing of the protest law was not enough for al-Adli supporters, further sought to enforce it in the most repulsive way. They did not just arrest peaceful protesters, but also beat them in a way sadly reminiscent of their violent past. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood is free to protest any place they choose. To conclude, Zahran indicates that the real problem is not in the police state in itself, as it is weak and obviously flawed. The real problem is that methods of the police state have encouraged the return of the Brotherhood. Matt Bradley, reporting for the Wall Street Journal, writes an article headlined "Time Magazine's Person of the Year Sparks Outrage in Egypt." Here, the writer looks at why many Egyptians found this a breach of democratic norms. According to Bradley, Time's decision sparked a predictable flood of outrage from Egypt's chattering classes by triggering two of the country's most fervent recent trends: a cult-like personality worship of General Sisi and an abiding belief that the US administration and media are conspiring against Egypt towards unstated ends. Bradley points out that radio hosts, newspaper columnists, and Egypt's highly active Twitter users castigated the popular publication for what they described as a willful failure to respect the public vote. Bradley refers to a message posted on Twitter by an Egyptian who gave her name as Riham Mohammed. She said, "It's not fair the Egyptian General Sisi is a man of the year. Then why you ask people to vote? You liars like your president." Bradley pointed out that the magazine's editors have repeatedly explained the title as identifying an influential personality, regardless of whether the person's contribution to world event has been positive or negative. Bradley, however, highlights the fact that many of General Sisi's supporters, and they are a legion in Egypt, championed the general's disregard for his country's own first ever free and fair presidential elections when he pushed President Mohamed Morsi from office on July 3rd. And to conclude, Bradley refers to famous Egyptian journalist Ibrahim Isa, who said, "Time's decision to eliminate General Sisi's name from its final top 10 revealed Western elites' animosity towards the celebrated, though controversial, general." No one should believe that the US would choose Sisi the man of the year, he added, implying that the American media is directed by the state. And joining me today to discuss Time Magazine choice of General Sisi as Person of the Year is political analyst Omar Ismail. Thank you, Omar, for joining us today. Can you hear me?
No problem. Pleasure. Yes, I can hear you quite clearly.
Omar, in light of Time Magazine announcing General Sisi Person of the Year, many analysts see that there is a hidden foreign agenda behind the choice. What do you think?
I think it actually goes further than the hidden agenda of the West or any other foreign powers. I'm sure that the military in the United States would like to see a strong man in Egypt, and Sisi represents that strong man at the moment. However, one must actually reflect on what's happened in Egypt at the moment and the vacant position of leadership. And I would like to go as back as maybe the 25th of January revolution, which was a leaderless revolution. And we know for a fact that leaderless revolution never succeeds. And I think that is representative opportunity, firstly, for the Muslim Brotherhood to hijack the revolution and manage to get hold of the levers of government in Egypt, albeit in an election. Nonetheless, they have succeeded in hijacking the revolution. I think if we fast forward to the 30th of June and the 3rd and the 4th of July, then the situation is exactly the same as the 25th of January, a leaderless revolution, which Sisi has in some way managed to portray himself as, one can say, a de facto leader of the revolution, despite the fact that he has denied any connection with that. And I think there are things that we have not been told yet.
Mr. Ismail, you mentioned that the revolution of January the 25th was a revolution without a leaderless revolution, and then you mentioned a bit earlier that Mr. General Sisi is a strong leader, in your opinion, or so he is seen by the United States and perhaps the West.
No, I didn't say he's a strong leader. He's a strong man only.
What do you mean, strong man, and why is this good?
Well, a strong man in Egypt means quite a lot. Particularly if it comes from, and I'm particularly actually aiming this at the United States government. They want to see stability, and that is stability on an say-so of what would protect the interest of America and the Middle East, in Egypt and in Israel as well. So Sisi represents to the American administration a very strong man, being an army officer. He has many connections in the United States. He has worked in the United States for a long time. He has been trained by the United States, and for a very long time he was I think he was the strong man of Egypt as well in terms of the Secret Service and the Army Secret Service as well.
So, do you think the voters in Egypt based their decision on these facts that you mentioned?
I wouldn't put it like that at all. I think if you ask the man in the street, I wouldn't say that they are not political animals. If pardon that expression, I think many Egyptians would see Sisi as someone who has, in a way, prevented a civil war in Egypt. How true that is, we really don't know, because the civil war didn't take place. We don't know whether the Muslim Brotherhood would have acted or reacted to the demonstration, the huge demonstration in the 30th of June. What way did they respond to this demonstration? We don't know. I think the main thing that really we should look at is who's behind the huge voting support of Sisi to become the president of Egypt, and obviously his success in becoming the person of the year. And you really have to also look at it from a different angle. The Time magazine is not a scientific. It's not voting intention of number of people. We don't know how many people voted, and we don't know how many people voted how many times. Yes, that's one thing. And what was the criteria of the Time magazine being a leader of the 2013. I think if we look at the political climate in the world, I would have actually put Putin in that category, because he has succeeded in forcing the American administration to back down from hitting or destroying some military installation in Syria. So I would personally have voted for Putin,
yes,
because he has succeeded in that sense.
Yes.
But I'm not quite sure what are the criteria of being a strong man or being the best man in 2013.
And do you think, Mr. Ismail, that General Sisi would win the elections in 2014?
How long is a piece of string? The Egyptian political situation is not settled, and if it is not settled prior to the election of 2014, when I say settled, finding an accommodation between the Muslim Brotherhood, one cannot deny their presence on the political scene in Egypt. They're not going to go quietly. One can see from their demonstration in various universities, and also the horrific scene of these accused leadership of whatever they did during the Rabaa and other demonstration by the Muslim Brotherhood during the hearing. And I think there is a huge issue there. And Sisi is not a stupid man. We might, and this is my own analytical way of looking at it, we might look at a leader that would come between a Sisi and Morsi.
Yes.
So they could be an interim leader coming in. And I discount the president, the interim president now, because he has been forced to take that position according to the constitution of 2012. So
yes.
I think by and large, Sisi has a chance if the chattering classes in Egypt are able to mobilize sufficient support to him right across the board. He might win. And that, we don't know whether he actually has not indicated that he will.
Yes.
He has not indicated that he won't either. So he has to answer that question first, I think.
Yes. Omar Ismail, also member of the Labour Party in Britain, thank you very much for your valuable participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As the date for Geneva II nears, let's take a look at what today's press is saying about the Syrian conflict. Secretary General for Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Madeleine Rees, takes a look at the upcoming Geneva II peace talks and the absence of women in her article, "Women Need to be Included in Syria's Peace Process." Rees says next month in Geneva, rebels will sit down to talk representatives of President Bashar al-Assad's government about a peace plan to end Syria's civil war. Yet again in human history, we are settling up a peace process that seems destined to fail before it has even begun. The people responsible for causing the conflict, the men with the guns, aided by the suppliers of guns, will also be trusted to deliver peace. And who will be missing from the room? Women. Madeleine Rees asks, so what is going on here? Why would Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi, the UN Secretary General's special envoy for Syria, say that the upcoming peace process is a huge opportunity for peace, when the approach being taken seems to suggest it will be the same recipe for disaster? Reed says it's hard to know. Common sense would dictate that if half of all peace agreements fail completely and the rest are questionable, then it is time to try a different approach. Yet when prominent women's organizations asked the UN to ensure that the inclusion of women in the upcoming Syrian peace negotiations, we were told that the political situation is complicated. Rees says we already know that, but the solution is not to perpetuate the divisiveness that led the country into war in the first place. That's why we are raising our voices to support the women of Syria who are asking to be included in decision-making regarding the future of their country. It is foolish to keep women out of the peace talks. Writing for Al Monitor, Edward Dark takes a look at recent statements from the Free Syrian Army General Salim Idris. In his article, Syrian Free Syrian Army struggles in shadow of said Saudi-backed opposition front. Dark says the bombshell that General Salim Idris of the Free Syrian Army's Supreme Military Command dropped last week, that he would be willing to join forces with the regime against Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups in Syria, came without too much scrutiny, especially when he subsequently tried to backtrack and sugarcoat his statement. But for the observant, the subtle message was all too clear. The moderate Western-backed FSA rebels in Syria are on their last legs, pushed to the limit and desperate. They are making their last stand here and now. Dark says the statement speaks volumes about the machinations, intricacies and subterfuges of Syrian conflict, now nearing its third year and drawing ever deeper into a chaotic and messy quagmire. Referring to the upcoming Geneva II talks, Dark says the fact that some sides aren't playing ball, or at least not by the agreed-upon rules, most notably the Saudis, who have opted to create their own way, Islamic Front team throws a spanner into the works. Dark takes a look at a workable solution that can be implemented in Syria, saying that it is a given that many fighting factions, most notably the extremist Islamist militants, won't abide by any such agreements and will therefore become the future enemy of a new Syria should one be agreed upon by the various players. The writer adds that in the frantic build-up and diplomatic arm-twisting before Geneva II, it seems the main priority is to get everyone on board with tackling the imminent Al-Qaeda menace, which friend and foe alike admit is now the biggest threat to their interests and to regional and global stability. And taking a look at Saudi's stance in regards to Syria, Dark says as far as Riyadh is concerned, a failed state ruled by Sunni extremists seemed preferable to the existence of any Iran-friendly regime in Syria. But despite deploying its cards via the Islamic Front, it remains to be seen whether Saudi Arabia will actively defy the US attempt to form an anti-Al-Qaeda coalition in Syria. And Dr. Mohammed Abdul Ibrahim writes a very interesting, heartfelt commentary editorial for Syria Times titled "Blind Support to Al-Qaeda Wahhabi Affiliates." Al-Ibrahim writes, the youths of the Gulf have been doing everything bad and negative in their powers, as well as in implementation for their masters' dictates, as to prolong the agony, bloodshed and suffering of the Syrians. He believes that since the very beginning of this crisis in Syria, largely and mainly caused by youths themselves, the ugly faces of petrodollars, including the Saudi, Qatari and Kuwaiti ones, have spoiled and distorted the face of Arabism as well as of Islam. The Wahhabi bloody brand is common and acceptable even by the Israelis. Al-Ibrahim adds that indeed the Syrians are great. They have been able not only to withstand the tsunamis of the EU's hatred, aggressions and fratricides, but because we are about to declare our victory over their unprecedented cannibalistic desire to eat our flesh. In regards to the GCC's recent comments about the Syrian crisis, Al-Ibrahim says the Syrians do condemn the Gulf Cooperation Council's recent flagrant interference in their own domestic affairs. The Syrians do hold the EUs themselves responsible for the shedding of Syria's blood. He adds that the EUs have been arming, backing, training and financing their own hired killers and terrorists as to kill the Syrians. Indeed, the pale faces and about to explode bellies of the EUs are disgusting, like their fake and empty political discourse when they claim to care about the Syrians. The writer concludes the EUs should be held accountable for their crimes against humanity, especially against the holy places and symbols of three monotheistic religions in Syria. One can't but wonder for how long could the EU's petrodollars save their necks and silence almost all world powers, not even to combat their latent inherited thirst and thrust for blood and terror. And finally, let's take a look at the top headlines from international papers. Iran's Tehran Times leads its front page with the headline "Moscow keen to continue nuclear cooperation with Iran, says Lavrov." And the UAE's Gulf News leads its front page with the headline "Summit welcomes Iran's new direction." Russia's Moscow Times leads its front page with the headline "Tug of war over Ukraine intensifies." And And finally, the international New York Times leads its front page with the headline, "Diplomats condemn crackdown in Kiev." And for more updates, please visit us on levant.tv. That was it for today. Kamer Cracknell will be with you tomorrow for Friday's press review.